Well, hello, my name is Christopher Scott, and I'm a small groups pastor of a local church. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you and show you how to use the Warren Wiersbe Bible Study Guide for the book of Romans to lead and facilitate a small group discussion. So in this video, I'm going to have four sections, cover four different things. I'm going to talk to you about how to prepare to facilitate your group. I'm going to talk to you about how to format your group, what are the elements. And then third, I'm going to talk to you about how to facilitate through the guide and how to specifically work through the guide. And then fourth, I'm going to talk to you about about an introduction to the book of Romans, a brief 5-minute introduction to this rich book, right? So first, let's talk about how do you prepare for your group. So you're going to facilitate a small group, you're going to lead a discussion, but you don't even know how to prepare. Maybe it's something like that is new to you, so let's talk about that. First thing you want to do is you want to pray for your group members and the material that you're going to be going through. Pray for your group members that God would change them and work in their hearts to grow and be more like Him. Also, pray for the material that you're going to use, that it would work in the lives of people and change them, okay? That's the first thing you want to do. Second thing you want to do is figure out what the passage is for that week for your group, what the passage in the Bible is, and then start reading it a few times. You don't have to do an in-depth study or anything fancy. Just read it quickly a few times. Get a feel for the passage, get a feel for what's going on, some of the themes, maybe start to think of some of the questions you might have of the passage, but just read it a few times to get a feel for what's going on there. The third thing you want to do to prepare for your group is you want to go through the Bible study guide and start to jot down some answers to the questions. Don't make them full sentences. Don't make it big, long journal entries. Just jot down a few little things, a few little bullet points about your thoughts on the questions that will help you lead a discussion. Then after that, you want to go through the commentary and read through the commentary. One of the reasons I really like the Warren Wiersbe Bible Study Guides is that there isn't just a little Bible study guide for the group, but there's a commentary that will help a facilitator, an apprentice, and co-leader to also read the commentary and give them a little background to the passage. Maybe give them a few warning signs for what people might say and how to correct that. Maybe there's a different way to interpret a passage, and Wiersbe will bring that up so that you can understand that and lead a discussion through it. Okay, so that's what you want to do next, is you want to read the commentary. You've prayed, you've read the passage, you've answered a few of the questions. Now you want to read Wiersbe's commentary and get a feel for what's going on. Or maybe you have another commentary that you really like. Read that one too, just to get a feel for maybe some possible interpretations of the passage, as well as some good application ideas for the passage. Okay. Then lastly, what you want to do to prepare is you want to go back through the Bible study guide, go back through your questions after you've read the commentary, see if there's anything you need to change, or maybe anything you want to add to what you said in the guide. And it's good to remember as you prepare, you're not preparing in order to teach or preach or coach or mentor. You're preparing to facilitate a discussion. You're preparing to lead and guide people through a discussion of the biblical text, right? So the primary text for your group is the Bible, right? You're guiding them through a discussion of the Bible, but you're using a Bible study guide with some questions and a little bit of commentary in there to help facilitate and keep that group on track, okay? And to have a correct interpretation of the passages too. So that's how you want to prepare for your group. How do you want to format your group? What are the elements that should be part of your small group, okay? So at our church, what we like to do is there's 3 core elements to every small group meeting, and then 2 other elements that you can add at the beginning and the end. But the middle section should have the same 3 elements done in the same order every single time, right? The first thing you need to do out of those 3 elements is to do the unifying question. And the unifying question is basically where you start out the group by saying, what did you all learn? What did you all take away from the message at church on Sunday? Okay, what stood out from the pastor's sermon? What did you learn? And you want to get people talking about the message just for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, not very long. And you want to do that unifying question for several reasons, okay? One reason is that you want people to remember what they heard on Sunday. If your group meets on a Wednesday, they probably have already forgotten what they heard on Sunday, if we were totally honest, right? So we want to remind them of what they're supposed to be applying each week. Another reason we do the unifying question is because just that, you want to remind them of what they're supposed to be applying to their lives each week. Maybe pastor said a thing or two in his message and people said, I need to do that this week, or I have this issue with this person, I really need to talk to them about it and apologize. And then they're like, dang, I haven't done that. So that's another reason we do the unifying question, is to remind people of what they're supposed to be applying to their lives. Another reason we do the unifying question is because we never want a small group to replace people attending church, right? We want small groups of our church to complement church on the weekend, not replace it, okay? And the unifying question helps build unity among everybody. It helps tell people that church is also important, not just being part of a small group. And it helps people realize my small group is nice, but I also need to be part of the big, large worship gathering of people as well, okay? So that's the unifying question. The next thing you're going to want to do in your group is you're going to want to read the passage, okay? So the book of Romans, it's 16 chapters is the book of Romans, and the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide has 12 lessons. So you're going to go through about 1.5 chapters per week, okay? Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two, pretty much. So that's the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide. And you want to read through that passage in your group so that everybody can hear. And if it's a new group and you don't really know your people, you as the facilitator need to read. Never ever call on someone to read in your group that you don't know, first of all, as a good reader, second, that likes to read, okay? Even some people don't want to read out loud, especially the Bible with those hard words and hard names, okay? So if it's a new group, you as a facilitator, you just read the passage. Some people like to put it on their phone and they let their phone read it. That's a great way too, because then everybody can listen to a professional read the Bible and let that professional figure out the weird hard names. But that's what you want to do, is you want to read through the passage so that the whole group can understand it. That's the second element. Third, you want to just basically work your way through the questions in the book, right? Keep the group on task, keep them on topic. And I'm going to give you specifics about how to facilitate a group in the next section, okay? So that's the three main core elements of every small group meeting: the unifying question, read the passage, and then go through the questions together as a group, okay? Then there's two other elements that you can add at the beginning or the end of your group, okay? And those elements are snacks, okay? We need snacks or dessert or whatever that might be. And then prayer time, okay? You want to make sure you always do prayer time in your group. You can do it at the beginning or the end. You just want to be consistent in where you do it and when, okay? So next, I want to talk to you about how to facilitate a discussion through the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide. The Wiersbe Bible Study Guide is a little complex because there's a couple different sections and different ways you can go about it. There's also a lot of questions, so sometimes that makes it hard. So I want to give you some good coaching about how specifically to use this Bible Study Guide in your small group, okay? So the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide is 12 lessons, okay? The title of it is How to Be Right with God, Yourself, and Others, and you're going to cover 1 to 2 chapters each week in your group, each week of the book of Romans, okay? So there's 12 lessons, which means 12 lessons, 12 weeks roughly that you can cover. However, there's 15 questions each week, so it's a lot of material to cover. If you have, 5 people or more in your group, it's going to be tough to get through all the material because you want to make sure everybody's talking and sharing, okay? So there's a few different ways you can format your group. You can say, we're going to cover one lesson, we're going to do 1 week per lesson no matter what. And you as a facilitator can just cut the group off quickly and keep it going. You can skip questions, things like that. That's probably not what I would recommend, but it is something that you can do. Another thing you can do is say we're going to spend 2 weeks per lesson, right? We're going to spend 2 weeks per lesson. That's a great way to go about it. And you can go about that 2 weeks per lesson method in a couple different ways. One, you can say, we're just going to talk about questions 1 through 7 this week, and then questions 8 through 15 next week. That's a great way to go about it. If you do go that way, you're going to need to summarize the second week what was covered the first week, okay? You as a facilitator give a 30-second summary of what you all talked about the week before, okay? Or what you can do is you can say, this week we're going to cover the odd questions, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. The next week we're going to do the even questions, questions 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, okay? That's another way to go about it. That way they're getting a feel for the whole lesson each week, which is kind of unique because they're still going to do the observation questions, the interpretation questions, and the application questions, okay? That's another good way to go about it, is doing odd and even. Another way you can go about the Wiersbe Guide, Romans is pretty complex and a little dense and heady, and there's just a lot of material in there. So you might say we're going to take 3 weeks per lesson, and we're just going to go through questions 1 through 5 1 week. Next week we're going to do questions 6 through 10. Next week we're going to do questions 11 through 15. That's another way you can go about it. Whatever works best for your group, and you got to judge your group and what works best for them. Just make sure you make a plan and then stick to it and be consistent so your group can follow along and follow that consistency. The Wiersbe Bible Study Guide has a 13th bonus lesson that I encourage you to do. It's a summary lesson where you pretty much go back through the whole book and you just summarize what you took away from it. There's only, I think, 5 questions in that summary lesson. So regardless if you say we're going to spend 1 week per lesson, 2 weeks per lesson, 3 weeks per lesson, you need to make sure you communicate each week with your group about what lesson you're in and what questions you're going to be covering, right? And so you as a facilitator, you don't have to do this. Find someone in your group who's gifted at administration, who likes details, who's organized, the person that's always on time, the person that always brings their book and their Bible. You can pick up on this pretty quick. Pick that person and say, hey, would you mind emailing our whole group or text messaging our whole group each week about what lesson we're in and what the questions are. Don't do it the night before the group meets. Do it at least, do it 5 days before. Give them a whole week so that they can prepare and have some time to go through the material. Because you never want people going through the questions and they show up and then you're 2 chapters farther and that's just a mess. So the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide, let's talk about the specific sections in here, okay? The specific sections, and they're broadly organized into 3 categories that I mentioned. There's 5 sections, but they're broadly organized into 3 categories: observation, interpretation, and application, okay? So the getting started questions 1 and 2 are the getting started questions, and that's where people are just basically making observations, okay? You're not making any deep theological issues or anything like that. You're just saying, what's the text say? What's going on there? What's it say? You're getting people in the text, having to make some basic observations and get interacting with the text a little bit, okay? That's the getting started questions 1 and 2. Questions 3 through 10 are the going deeper questions, and that's the interpretation questions, right? What does this mean, right? So Wiersbe will take you to other parts of the Bible to read those so that you can interpret what's being said in Romans, right? He'll give you some commentary excerpts where you can start to, maybe understand a little more deeply what does it mean by the, capital L law, like what's that mean? He'll give you a commentary excerpt to explain that, things like that. So that's the going deeper sections. If there's going to be a section that your group gets bogged down in and that spends the most time in and struggles with, it's going to be the going deeper section. So you got to make sure you keep them going in that section, because you'll never finish if you just let them talk about whatever they want in that section. Third section is the looking inward section, and this is a section where people are starting to internalize and apply what they're learning to their lives, right? So we talked about observation, interpretation, application. The looking inward section and the going forward section are the application questions, okay? So for looking inward, those are questions 11, 12, and 13, right? And you never want to skip this section, because this is where people are starting to internalize and personalize what they're learning in the passage, okay? So never skip this. Make sure you take some time for this. And if your group has, let's say, 9 people or more in your group, divide your group up into subgroup, right? Do subgrouping. So if you have 9 people in your group, make 3 groups of 3 so that everybody gets a chance to share how they're going to apply this to their lives. And it will help your group keep going a little faster if you subgroup. So if you're having trouble getting through lessons, make sure you subgroup starting in the looking inward sections, okay? So that's questions 11, 12, and 13 is the looking inward sections. Then there's the going forward section, and that's question 14, where it encourages people to make a commitment to do something in their lives to apply what they've learned. So commit to doing something based on what they've learned, right? So usually Wiersbe will encourage them to go back through the passage. Maybe what they're going to commit to is memorizing a verse. That's one great commitment to have everybody make each week. Which verse from this passage are they going to memorize? Great application. Additionally, you want to do something a little bit more practical too. What's something practically in your life you're going to do to apply this to your life, okay? And Wiersbe usually will give you a couple of good suggestions in there too. It's the italics that are kind of inset. He'll give you a couple suggestions as well if your group is struggling. And you want to have people subgrouped for the going forward section too, if you need to. So that's a great way to keep the group going. All right. Then the last question, question 15, is seeking help. And it's just a prayer. It encourages people to write out a prayer to the Holy Spirit to help him or her apply the material to their lives, right? So you got the getting started questions. That's just basic observation, seeing what's in the text. Then you got the going deeper questions. That's the interpretation, where you're really digging in deep. And then there's the looking inward and going forward questions. Those are the application, where people are going to actually do something with what they've learned, okay? And as you go through these, you want to make sure, first, know your lesson. Know what's going on, know the passage, and remember, your job is to facilitate, not to teach or preach. Your job is to guide a discussion, okay? So don't feel pressured that you have to do that, to preach or teach. Just guide a discussion. Additionally, application is more important than completion, okay? So if you don't get through the whole lesson each week, that's okay. Just make sure people are applying what they're learning to their lives. Come up with a plan and try your best to stick to it, but if you have to deviate from that plan for how you're going to complete the lessons, that's okay. Okay? I said earlier that you want to text and email your group maybe each week about what lesson you're in and what questions you're talking about. So that's something you want to have someone in your group doing. Additionally, never ever skip the looking inward or going forward questions. That's where people are going to actually apply to their lives what they've learned. So don't ever skip those. You want to keep those. In the Wiersbe Bible Study Guides, you want to make sure everybody has a guide. So encourage them to bring it with them, to work through it before they come. If they show up to group and they forgot it, whatever that might be, loan them one, but don't give them one, right? At our church, we usually ask for $10 to cover the cost of each book. So if they get one and they pay $10, and they show up a week later and they forgot it, let them borrow one, but then make sure you get it back, okay? So additionally, how I like to say it is, if someone's going to spend $10 on this, they're going to work through the questions, and they might want to read the commentary too. If they're going to make that commitment on their own, I just give them the commentary, okay? If they're going to read the passage, work through the questions, and then read a commentary to continue to grow and learn, I believe our church just gives them the commentary. If they're going to make that commitment on their own, the church is going to make that investment into them, okay? So I think that's about it for how to facilitate the group. Next, I want to talk to you about a brief introduction to the book of Romans. Just a maybe 5-minute introduction to the book of Romans, right? So Romans is Paul's letter to the Romans, obviously, the people in Rome, right? So in this section, in an introduction to the book of Romans, I'm going to talk about 5 things. We'll talk about the audience. I'm talking about the author who wrote the book, the audience he was writing to, the date the book was written. I'm going to give you an outline of the book, a key verse, and then a key theme. I think that's actually 6. It's getting mixed up. It's 6 things, okay? 6 things. So the author of the book of Romans is the Apostle Paul. And we love Paul's letters because he just tells us in the first verse, I, Paul, an apostle and slave of Jesus Christ. So we know it was Paul, okay? So the audience that he was writing to was a broad group of Gentile believers in Rome. Maybe there's a little some Jewish people mixed in there, but it's a pretty broad letter, right? It's a big, long letter. It's a broad letter written to everybody, right? So he wrote it to the Church of Rome. We know that from Romans 1:7. We don't really know how the church in Rome started. Paul had been there before, but we don't really know who these people were or how the church was started, right? So it's a little bit of a mystery, but we know it was just a big, broad letter. The date the book was written was in AD 57 to 59, somewhere in there. AD 57 to 59. And those numbers mean nothing to you unless you have a little bit of a bookend on each side of it to tell you what's important. So Jesus Christ likely died and was crucified in about 33 to 36 AD. And the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation in 95 AD. That was the last book of the Bible written, okay? So Jesus died in 33 to 36 AD, somewhere in there. Scholars differ. And then John wrote the book of Revelation in 95 AD. Romans was written in 57 to 59 AD, somewhere in there. Most of the Gospels were written in the 60s or later, right? So this book of Romans was probably written before the Gospels were written. However, the book of Romans was not the first book of the Bible written that was included in the New Testament. Usually people will say Galatians or James were the first 2 books of the New Testament that were written. But Romans is an early one as well, but it still was earlier than the Gospels. A lot of people think the Gospels were all written first, and then the letters kind of all came off of that. Interestingly, a lot of the letters were written first, and the Gospels were composed later, okay? Warren Wiersbe gives a great outline of the book of Romans that I really like. He talks about how the first 17 verses of Romans are an introduction, and then chapter 1, verse 18 through chapter 3:20 talks about righteous anger against sin. Then chapters 3 through 5 is righteous faith in believers. Chapters 6 through 8 are relationship between sin and the new life, the relationship between sin and the new life that we have in Christ. Chapters 9 through 11, religion in Jews and Gentiles. And then he talks about the righteous life in chapters 12 through 16, okay? And a key verse for the book of Romans that Wiersbe says is a key verse for this book that I agree as well is Romans chapter 1, verse 17. So you get to see how quickly I can find books of the Bible here in this video. Chapter 1, verse 17 says, "This good news tells us how God makes us right in his sight. This is accomplished from start to finish by faith. As the scriptures say, it is through faith that a righteous person has life." It is through faith that a righteous person has life. That's the big key theme of the book of Romans. And that I just said, righteousness of God and the righteousness we have is a big theme of the book of Romans, right? And that's why Wiersbe calls the Bible study guide how to be right with God, yourself, and others. That's a big topic of the book of Romans. Romans is a big, long book. It's a thorough theological treatise or thorough theological argument, right? But it is a rich book that I believe every small group should study certain books of the Bible. Galatians, Ephesians, James, Ezra, Nehemiah, Ruth, Esther, John, Hebrews, and the book of Romans is one of those books as well that I believe every small group should cover. So I will be praying for you and your group as you study this rich book and use the Wiersbe Bible Study Guide. If you have any questions about how to use the Warren Wiersbe Bible Study Guide, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel and get updates on future videos, you can subscribe up there. If you want to find other how-to videos on how to use the Wiersbe Bible Study Guides, there's some videos up there. If you want to find some small group facilitator tips, I got some videos down there. And then if you want some other 5-minute introductions to books of the Bible, you can find that down there. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you again in another video.